Talk to you just for about 10 or 15 minutes on the subject that I have entitled, Leave It in the Water. Leave it in the water. 1 John chapter 5, we read these words. It says, "This is the one who came by water and blood, Jesus Christ. He did not come by water only, but by water and blood. And it is the Spirit who testifies, because the Spirit is truth. For there are three that testify, the Spirit, the water, and the blood. And the three are in agreement." Leave it in the water. In about 20 minutes' time, we're about to baptize about 10, 11 people. We're not too sure exactly how many. And we're looking forward to doing this here. But baptism is really about, it's very symbolic of who we were and of who we are becoming. The Bible, whenever Paul is talking to the Romans, and he says, "We are therefore buried with Christ through baptism into death, in order that just as Jesus was raised from the dead, we too might live a new life." So Paul talks about us being buried with Christ. And what will happen, and what you're about to see if you haven't seen a baptism service before in this place, we will bring everybody into the water, not all at once, one at a time. We'll bring them in, and then we will baptize them. We will lower them down backwards, and then we will raise them up again. And what Paul is saying here, he's talking about the symbolism of that is us, our old nature, our old person, being put to death and being buried with Christ. But then us being raised to a new life in Jesus Christ. That's the symbolism of it all. Paul talks about being a new creation in Christ, being made new. He says, all the old has passed away. It's dead. It's gone. And I am now a new creation. In other words, Christianity is not about just turning over a new leaf. Or, well, I'm going to do better at life, or I'm going to become a good person. That's not what Christianity is all about. Christianity is about death and resurrection. It is about your old nature, your old self dying, being put to death and being buried with Christ, and then being raised up into a new life in Christ. Paul says, I'm a new creation. Everything, all that old stuff is passed away. It's dead. That person no longer exists. That person is dead. So sometimes whenever people become Christians, they become new followers of Jesus, then they're all kind of acquaintances begin to kind of throw a bit of mud at them and say, well, you remember you used to do so-and-so, and you remember you used to go to, and you remember you used to do this, you remember you used to do that there, and we're able to say, well, that was the old person. The new person doesn't do that anymore. That person is dead. That person doesn't exist anymore. You're now talking to the new person. You can't talk to the old person anymore because they're dead, they're gone. I'm a new creation, a new creature. I have been made new. This old person is dead, and I am now a new creation in Christ. And so baptism is about being buried with Christ and being raised to a new life in Him. It speaks of cleansing. Baptism didn't just happen because of Christianity. It didn't start with Christianity. Baptism is a thing that has gone on for even longer before Christianity was established. Even within Judaism, there was baptism. There was people being lowered into water and being raised. There was, with the priests of Judaism, before they went into what was known as the Holy of Holies, before they went into the holy place where the presence of God was, where they would make a sacrifice, they would go through this ritual of cleansing of water. We go through that ourselves before we eat our food. We will wash our hands. We will tell our kids, go wash your hands. And they go and they say they've washed their hands. Sometimes they have, sometimes they haven't. We don't know. It's 50-50 chance. And even if they have, it doesn't really matter, because by the time they get down the stairs, they pick their nose that much that they're not hungry anymore. But we go through this ritual cleansing of our hands before we eat. And so within Judaism and with other religions, it spoke of cleansing, of being cleansed. With Christianity, it's slightly different because the cleansing has to take place within us. Jesus had arguments with the religious people of his day. And very often he called them whitewashed tombs. They look good on the outside, but inside they were filled with dead men's bones. He talked about the outside of the cup being cleansed, but inside. And it's what takes place on the inside that really matters. This is what needs cleansed. Our hearts, our souls, our spirits. That's what needs cleansed. And we can come to church and look the part and sound the part and be smiling and everything looks good on the outside. But on the inside, we can be falling apart. We can be breaking apart. Charisse talked about her struggles. But I dare say that at the start of her story, whenever the depression started to attack it, that she would put the makeup on and she would go and she would maybe do the singing in the pubs and the clubs or wherever, and she would look good and she would sound good. But inside she was falling apart. Inside she was breaking. Very often we can be like that in life, where we can make the outside look great, but on the inside, we're dead. On the inside, we need help. On the inside, we need change. And this is the symbolism of baptism. That what is on the inside is being put to death, and we are being raised, we are being renewed to a new life in Jesus Christ on the inside. So you've got that symbolism of baptism, of being buried with Christ, but then you've got this cleansing that takes place. In 2 Kings in chapter 5, there's a story of a guy by the name of Naaman. Naaman is from a nation, you're going back Old Testament, so you're going back thousands and thousands of years here. And he's from a nation by the name of Aram. It's now modern day Syria. And Aram was an enemy of Israel a few thousand years ago. And the head of the army was a guy called Naaman. He was the commander of the army. Naaman, for all the men in here, Naaman was what you would call a man's man. To be leading an army like this, to be the commander, then you would have to have something about you as a man, something about you as a leader of men. And Naaman had it all. He was the commander of the king's army, and they would go to war against Israel. But Naaman had a problem. And in spite of being the leader of this army, in spite of being the commander of this army, Naaman had leprosy. He had a condition. He had a skin condition. His skin was falling apart. He was falling apart himself. And very often what Naaman would do is he would put on the armor and he would lead his army into battle. And whenever he's got the armor on, then he looks the part. But underneath the armor, he is falling apart. Again, we can look good on the outside. Everything can look good as he's leading his army and everybody's looking at him and he's dressed for the part. He's dressed to lead his army. But you remove the armor, then you've got this skin condition, this skin disease. And underneath, he needs help. This is a life-changing condition, a life-threatening condition. He's got leprosy. This is going to take his life. This man who seems to have it all, a man's man, leading an army of men, and yet this is what he's going through. This is what he's having to deal with. This is what he's having to live with. Take the armor off. And what do you see? Nothing but a man with leprosy. And he doesn't know what to do because there's no doctors. This is incurable. This is an incurable disease. As part of the wars that went on between Aram and Israel, a band of the soldiers, they go into Israel and they take a young girl as slave. And they bring her back to Aram, and she ends up in the house of Naaman, serving Naaman's wife. And she hears about Naaman's condition. And she says to her mistress, to Naaman's wife, she says, you know what? If only Naaman could get to Israel. There's a man of God in Israel. There's a prophet in Israel. And I know that he heals people. And if your husband can get to him, then I reckon he could heal your husband. Able to meet this man and he could heal you. And whenever you're in a position where it's incurable, there is no cure for this, then you're in a place where you would do almost anything in order to get cured. And so Naaman goes to the king of Aram and he says, King, there's a chance here. There's apparently a man of God in Israel. I know we're enemies, but, it's got to be worth a shot. So the king writes up a letter, gives it to Naaman and says, here, take this to the king of Israel and go find the man of God. And he puts together loads of money and of possessions that he's going to take as a gift to the king and to the prophet of God. So Naaman saddles up, gets all his men around him, and away he goes. He goes to the king with the letter. And the king says, I know who you're talking about. His name is Elisha. You'll find him over here. And so Naaman goes to the home of Elisha, the prophet of God in Israel at that time, with the thoughts of, could this man heal me? Could this man really deliver me from my leprosy? So Naaman pulls up at Elisha's house, at his front door. He's got all of his men with him, and he's got all of these possessions, all this money and all these possessions that he's going to give to Elisha as a gift. And Elisha doesn't even come to the door. The message goes to Elisha from Elisha's servant that Naaman's at the door. He's got leprosy and he's come because he's been told that you can heal him. Elisha doesn't even come to meet him at the door. Of course, Naaman is angry at this. He doesn't even come to meet me. I've come all this way to his house and he doesn't even come to meet me. Elisha sends him a message and says, go to the river Jordan. Dip in the river Jordan 7 times. And Naaman goes away angry. He's angry. He says, he didn't come to the door to see me. Doesn't come to greet me. And he tells me to go and dip in the river Jordan for 7 times. The river Jordan is stinking. The river Jordan is disgusting. Why could it not be a nice river where I come from? Why could he not ask me to do this or this or this? And he asked me to go and dip in the dirty, stinking, disgusting river Jordan. No, I'm not. He didn't even come to see me. And he goes off and he's angry. And he's traveling home, and some of his men, they gather around him and say, Naaman, listen, do you not think it's worth a shot? If he had have asked you to do some great thing, then you would have done it. He's asking you, we know, that we know about the river. We know it's not nice, but he's asking you to dip in the river Jordan 7 times. Do you not think, Naaman, that it's worth a shot? And they convince him. He says, okay, let's go. So he goes to the river Jordan and he dips in the river Jordan 7 times. And the Bible tells us that on the 7th time he came out of the water and his flesh was like that of a little baby. He was healed of his leprosy. He walked into the water a leper and he came out healed. What he had, he left it in the water. I want to tell you today, leave it in the water. You may be here today and you may not have leprosy, but what is your leprosy? What is your condition? What is it that is holding you back, that is driving you down, that is crippling you and crushing you? What is it that you're struggling with? God is telling you today, leave it in the water. As these people are baptized, then they are being buried with Christ. That old nature is being left in the water and they are being raised to a new life in Jesus Christ. Naaman left his leprosy in the water. What is it that you need to leave in the water today? A number of years later, after the story of Naaman, a man called Jesus steps into this scene of time. Born in Bethlehem, the son of Mary and Joseph. He grows to be a man and he makes a number of claims that he is the Messiah. And he is crucified on a cross by Roman soldiers. Jesus, who we have sang about, who is worthy? He is. He is the only one worthy. That's who we have been singing about a person His name is Jesus. He is the Son of God. He came willingly to this earth to die for the sins of this earth. And he is nailed to the cross for you and for me. He's nailed between two other men. And it's the most gruesome death that you could ever have in this life. Crucifixion. Two men are crucified either side of him. And a group of religious men, they come to the Romans and to the religious men and to the Roman soldiers, and they say, listen, it's almost our holy day. We need these men to be dead by tonight. And they go, the Roman soldiers, they go to the two men who are either side of Jesus, and they break their legs. It's bad enough that they're nailed to a cross for their sins, for what they did. But they break their legs in order to prevent them from pushing themselves up so they can breathe. You die by suffocation because you've got to push yourself up to breathe. And they break their legs so they can't push themselves up. What a gruesome picture. And they come to Jesus to break the legs of Jesus, and they discover he's already dead. He's already dead. And just to make sure, a spear is put into the side of Jesus. And out of the side of Jesus pours blood and water. That was given for you. And it would have came out of his side, came down to the bottom of the cross, to the foot of the cross. The blood and the water. What we read at the start about Jesus is he is the one who came by water and blood. You see, what has to happen for all of us, the best thing that could happen for any one of us, is that we come to the cross, that we come to the place where Jesus sacrificed his life for us. That's the moment of change. That's the moment in the place of redemption. That's the place where our old nature, we can give it over to him. And as we give it over to him, then he gives us himself. We give him us. We say, here I am, Lord, come, take me. And he gives himself. And so as he's hanging on that cross, blood and water pour out to the foot of the cross. At the foot of the cross, there is blood and water. Whatever it is that you're carrying, whatever it is that you're holding on to, whatever it is that is destroying you on the inside, leave it in the water. Leave it in the water. Leave it at the foot of the cross. Leave it at the feet of Jesus. Whatever that leprosy is, leave it in the water. And what you will find that as you leave it with him, I know it's difficult, but as you give it over to Jesus, then he gives you himself. He is our inheritance. We talked last Tuesday in the prayer meeting, we shared a little bit about heaven. And we're describing heaven, by what heaven would look like. And we said, now, imagine if Jesus wasn't there. It wouldn't be heaven, because our inheritance is a man called Jesus. That same man who was nailed to a cross, he is our inheritance, and his blood and water flow down to his feet and flow down to the foot of the cross. Then whatever it is that you're carrying, leave it in the water. Leave it in the water.